Okay, hi everyone, I'm Ben, I'm a H5P lead ambassador, and today I'd like to present a H5P course presentation example for language learning. This course presentation I built for a conversational language learning lesson in Vietnamese, specifically for developing practice for dialogues in different contexts. And the inspiration for this one, and I'll just minimize this, came from a previous course presentation I built many years ago now, where I explored designing a complete lesson in Vietnamese that was conversationally based, and it included a variety of visuals, audio, video. You can see the embedded video here, grammatical notes, cultural explanations about the language, and also notes about how to navigate this, the context of this conversation too. Vocabulary here, and also the actual exchange, the conversation. On the next screen it just goes into the first exchange.
Em chào cô ạ.
And then there's quizzing later on, so it's quite a comprehensive lesson. Right, so the other inspiration comes from a language platform called Mango Languages. I don't know if you know this one, but it provides a conversational, conversationally based learning approach, which has, slides, a linear navigation here. You can see I go next through the presented language. If I go back just quickly, it starts with the conversation, for each of the people that are speaking. Then you go next, of course. It starts with each line of the conversation. It includes pronunciation practice, cultural and grammatical aspects as well, and of course the practice of the language. So to give you a little bit more context for this activity, I built it for a client in Vietnam, and it's a language center based in Ho Chi Minh City. And I'll just quickly have a look at their YouTube channel. They, provide activities to support and extend the lesson, video lessons they provide to their learners. And in this case, it was to develop ways to practice the presented language, and also offer them a few ideas of how to scaffold the language learning. So the primary source of material for this lesson based was a video. So therefore, the learning for this module is centered around this video, and it's about 3.5 minutes in length, and it's around the post-beginner, I would say, or pre-intermediate level, and it's in the context of language for traveling, specifically interactions you might find when at an airport. The language is presented in Vietnamese using authentic language in real life situations, but no explanations of language was presented in the video. Only the general context of the language is explained in English. They use subtitles to aid initial understanding and present key language in Vietnamese on the screen. And the language is presented in a dual-paced approach. That means that they start with a slower paced version of the exchange, then they present it at the same language but at a faster, more natural pace. So the video serves as the presentation of the language, and what I built was the practice portion, if you like, with explanations of the language. So let's start. I've embedded the first page of the video in the first page of the course presentation, and I'll just play a short segment so you can hear and get an idea of how the language is presented in the video.
Welcome to Vietlingo. Today I will introduce you some common sentences that you might see and hear in the airport.
Ở sân bay.
Let's get started. So this is a sentence you might hear. Now listen, chị ơi, Chị có thể cho em coi hộ chiếu được không?
Hộ chiếu của chị đây.
Cảm ơn chị. Chị có thể cho em coi cái hộ chiếu được không?
Hộ chiếu của chị đây.
Cảm ơn chị.
So as you can hear, there's a lot of language presented in a short time, and you can see the visuals there that she's, he's asking for something and she's passing, and that's a passport in this case. And they only pausing to emphasise the questions asked in Vietnamese, and just here, was where the second faster version was said. If I just move on now to the next slide, and I'll show you how I put this together. Again, this activity is meant to develop practice and understanding of the presented language. So the second slide here shows a representation of the two parts covered in this video. One being the language you might hear at an airport, and two, the language you might say at an airport. So it mirrors the structure of this video lesson. So as you can see here, that you're offered a choice here, and I've included the characters and the titles of these characters here, the flight attendant and the passenger, which isn't covered in the video. And you can see that how I've used the graphics of the characters to show and the icons to emphasize who is doing the talking and who is doing the listening. So the main character is larger, more prominent, and I've used the icons for speaking and listening to illustrate those aspects as well. So clicking on one of these paths takes you to the title slide of that section, and I'll just do that now. And in this case, it's the language you might hear at the airport, with titles and a list of topics of the interactions contained. And the navigation back, you can see to the initial slide or the video. And these are persistent navigation features, so potentially you could set this up to be presented in active surface mode, which removes all the inbuilt navigation. That could also work with the way this course presentation is designed, I think. So you can see that I've decided to break up the interactions by topic and of the exchanges here, then line by line. And I just warning, we'll just go into the first one, that the audio plays automatically when I click on this slide.
Chị có thể cho em coi hộ chiếu được không?
Okay, so I've done this on purpose so that the learners immediately are presented with the language. It's one less click too. You can listen again by clicking on the text and practice that way. You can see that the first line is presented with a speech bubble. That's just another clue to who's speaking in this context. I've got graphics for the actual vocabulary that's been, or the key context of this question. So it helps illustrate the meaning as much as possible. And with the graphics, you can see I've got a background graphic for an airport as well. And there's color-coded translation at the top here. You can see top right corner. That mirrors the language in Vietnamese. It just helps with understanding as well. So of course, if you click here, you can hear the
Chị có thể cho em coi hộ chiếu được không?
interaction, and I've got some explanations here what they are, so just so that the learner will can understand. Clicking on the man here plays the audio at the faster pace.
Chị có thể cho em coi cái hộ chiếu được không?
Okay, and then and that's it. And then you can see I've got a way to get back to the title, if you like, slide here in this section. So if I click on that, it just takes you back here. So let's go to slide 7, I think. Well, let's just go through a couple.
Hộ chiếu của chị đây.
Okay, that's her response.
Cảm ơn chị.
And his response.
Chị ơi, chuyến bay của chị bị hoãn lại 45 phút.
Okay, on this slide, I've introduced some grammatical explanations here on the right, which comes from the dialogue or the presented language. In this case, you can see it's a particle that's quite unique in Vietnamese. So I thought it would be useful to illustrate what that means. It's only a presentation; it's not any practice of it, but it's just further enhancement of this exchange. And so we move on. I'll just go to the next slide.
Trời ơi.
You can see here I've also included a way to get back to the beginning of this exchange. So if I click here, it takes you back to the title of this little exchange here. Let's go to slide 9.
Chị muốn ngồi gần cửa sổ hay gần lối đi?
So at this slide, I got another grammatical explanation here. I've even used color coding here for the vocabulary. So you can see here, one is for the aisle and one is for the window seat, and that matches here as well. So very much like you can see that inspiration from Mango Languages with the color coding. All right, so there you have it. That's the example I've got. I guess the rest of it just goes through the exchanges. But I thought this is quite a nice way to model and practice the language from the video. The only sort of critique from my perspective would be of this approach is that with the offering of the fast and the slower paced might not offer that much value to, can cause frustration and anxiety for learners when they're listening to language that's too fast. But I know when I was learning, the slower the pace, the easier it was at the beginning to understand what was being said, because you could you could distinguish between the words and the sounds a bit easier. So having language that was too fast wasn't useful for me anyway. Yeah, because at this stage, really you just need to hear the sounds and the nuances, and particularly the tones of Vietnamese. So and then you can move on to fluency with your practice later. But listening to that fast pace is not necessarily an advantage. So it'd be interesting to know what you think about this, and also it's definitely not by any means a complete lesson, just the practice of the presented language with some small additions to aid understanding with translations and visual cues and graphical representation. I also suggested a way to present and practice the key vocabulary from this lesson using image choice and things like that before you even get into this conversation. So the advantage of using course presentation with this type of language lesson is that it you can organize the content in a linear fashion, right to left, and it mimics the turn taking of an exchange, as opposed to something like interactive book where the navigation is more horizontal, or and not linear or vertically. It's nice to progress through these exchanges line by line on each slide, so you're sort of isolating the language, and you can then practice it. Playing the audio for the first time is a unique feature of course presentation, being able to trigger that sound via the transparent button, and also the go-to slides, where you can easily navigate around, or it aids navigation, and also being able to arrange your media on the slides wherever you like is also a good feature of course presentation, something you can't control as much in interactive book. So there you have it. I think we'll leave it there. Let us know what you think of this interaction. Cheers. Thanks for that.